It is a relatively small crowd in the theater, but we're using the mic because we're live streaming this event to our community, and we're also going to tape it so they can access it later on. So we're usually in the comfy confines of Schlafly's tap room with beverages and snacks, but we thought we'd bring it into the auditorium today. So thank you all for coming. The topic today is bullying, which is an important topic. I mean, I would say as a partner of the community here and as a longstanding member, something we think about a lot. We care about this issue. We want to get it right. We want to learn alongside you as community members and parents. And what's interesting about bullying, is I was thinking about this today, it is one of the topics that there is some universal shared experience about it. Many of us have been bullied at a point in our life. We've certainly been bystanders, or we've had family members impacted by that. And because of that shared, it's one of the few topics that we actually have a shared life experience around. And it's hard. We know there's hurt, and there's harm, and there's need to repair. We get that, we really do. And that's why we kind of carved out some time to kind of begin the conversation. Tonight's goal is pretty modest, but important, is to start the conversation. One of the things that's confusing and difficult and tricky about bullying is we're often talking about it when we're elevated and upset. And so our ability to navigate that conversation is impacted by real, understandable feelings about what happened to our child or to ourselves. And then when we don't have common language and common understanding, it makes that conversation go more difficult. And so really one of our modest goals, but important goals, is to level set tonight and develop the collective understanding around language and some trends and best practices and how MRH kind of tackles this problem at a kind of a tier one grassroots level, so there's a common understanding, so that when we have to have the conversation that's hard and we're elevated, we at least have some common understanding. And this is important for us as administrators as much as it is for our parents and our students. We equally share the role and responsibility of learning about bullying and doing something about it collectively. It's not the responsibility of the kid to solve the problem, or the school administrator, or the parent. We have to do it together, for sure, 100%. So we brought in a presenter who, I think to quote her, is bad in retirement because she's a retired counselor, but is now working for Chad's Coalition, which is one of our Children's Service Fund partners. And she has a presentation she wants to share with us about bullying, kind of some ground level, foundational pieces so we can get some understanding. And we will build in some questions about either the presentation or what the district does in general. And some of you have cards. So if you have individual questions you want to raise to the buildings or more personal nature involving your child, put that on the card. We can try to tackle that a little bit later, okay? So with no further ado, this is our new friend Mindy. She'll tell a little bit about herself and Chad's and go through the presentation. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. So I know exactly what people are thinking about bullying because I worked in public education for 32 years, first as a high school teacher and then as an elementary and then middle school counselor. So lots of experience working on the school side, but I'm also a parent of kids who at one time or another dealt with bullying in their own lives. And so like I said, I worked for Parkway for 32 years. I retired 5 years ago. I'm a very bad retired person because I started with Chad's part-time. And then our program manager, I run the program in which we go into schools and do presentations for kids. And your district has really welcomed us in to talk to kids of all grades, and so we appreciate that partnership. But then, so the manager of our program was leaving, and my chief program officer came to me, and she's like, listen, I feel like you know how to talk to school personnel, you know what it means, what the barriers to scheduling are, you can talk language like IEP, 504, adaptive curriculum, and all that kind of stuff. Would you be the manager? And so I said yes. I think I have that, like this genetic predisposition to say yes to things. But it's been wonderful, and I've gotten to meet a lot of great people along the way, kids and school staff as well. So I'm happy to be here. And like we said, we're just going to kind of talk about what is bullying, what to do if you are fearful that your kid's being bullied, how do you talk to them, how do you approach the school, all that kind of stuff, in an attempt to sort of hopefully ease the fears of people, parents, and also kind of talk about how to build that partnership with your school and empower your kid to be able to stand up and speak for themselves on this topic. Okay, so, oh, I talked about that already. So a really big thing that I want to do first, and I remember this conversation many times when I was a school counselor, is talk about what is bullying and what isn't bullying. So what I have up here are facts about bullying behavior. It is aggressive, and we're going to talk about the different ways that kids bully each other. It is an imbalance of power, either actual or perceived. And the most important part is that it is repetitive. It happens or has the potential to happen over and over again. Here's the thing. Kids say hurtful, disrespectful things. Whether it's on purpose, whether it's because they're trying to express themselves and they don't know how to do that in a more effective way. But saying unkind things is not bullying, okay? So I always, when I talk to kids about this, I'll walk up to the teacher and I'll say, ugh, gosh, I don't like your shirt at all. And I'll say to the kids, is that bullying? It's not. Is it hurtful? Is it unkind? Is it disrespectful? Absolutely. But it's not bullying. And I think that that's really important to remember. My new friend right here was talking about the fact that if your kid doesn't get invited to a birthday party, if your kid is sort of on the outside of things, that is also not necessarily bullying. Is it hurtful? Yes. Is it unkind? Yes. But it's not necessarily bullying. Okay? And so I think it's really important that we understand what is and isn't bullying so that we can talk about it more effectively and more impactfully. Okay. So just changing our perspective, words really matter. I talk about this when we talk about people who struggle with their mental health, when we talk about suicide, things like that, which is what our organization is all about. And so bullying is no different in terms of changing our perspective and using correct language. So rather than call someone a bully, it's a student who bullies, or a victim, a student who is bullied. Behavior is a permanent characteristic, but behavior can also be replaced or changed. So it's important to remember that. Let's talk for a second about different types of bullying. I always laugh because I'll go into schools and I'll say to the kids, especially if it's younger kids, I'll say, do like other kids beat kids up for their lunch money? And they look at me and they're like, what are you talking about? Because first of all, nobody has lunch money anymore, right? That's like a big thing. But we do see certainly physical altercations and sometimes physical bullying, but it's not like when I was growing up, that was like the main way that people bullied each other. You know, like we're not seeing that as much in our schools because it's been replaced with something a little bit more serious. So verbal bullying, saying or writing mean things, teasing, name calling, taunting, threatening, those things are all definitely bullying. Now, suppose a kid walks in to school one day, walks up to your kid and calls them a name. One time. Again, not bullying. If your kid says to them, please don't call me that, I don't like that, things like that, and it continues, then we're sort of crossing a line a little bit, okay? So just keep that in mind. We talked about this, physical bullying, hurting a person's body or their possessions. That could include spitting, tripping, taking and breaking things, making rude gestures, stuff like that. This is what we see more of. Social bullying. It includes hurting, oh, I have a typo there, someone's reputation or relationships, purposely leaving someone out, right? Excluding them. I used to see this sometimes when I worked as a counselor and I had to do lunch duty. Kids sitting around the table and intentionally putting their arms out and prohibiting somebody from sitting at the lunch table. Day in, day out, that kept happening, right? Telling others not to be friends. Spreading rumors is a big one that we deal with in schools, spreading gossip and rumors, and embarrassing people intentionally over and over again. Maybe pointing something out about how they look or how they dress or things like that, and really targeting an individual student, okay? The other one that I want to talk about is this, because this is really a big one. Cyberbullying, here's the thing. When I was a kid and somebody was bullied, it happened at school. You got on the bus and you went home, and it was pretty much over. The problem now is because of that little thing that they hold in their hands, it is constant. So if a kid is being bullied over social media, over text, whatever, it is like they can't get away from it. It's constant, right? And so that's a big thing that's happening. Also, the other thing about it is it can be anonymous. Kids are so savvy with this technology today. They are creating fake accounts using actual pictures of kids. And then that's how they are bullying them, and they can't be traced because they're using a picture of a kid, but like a different account. And so that becomes a really big issue in trying to figure out who is at the root of the bullying situation, right? The other thing is quick distribution and wide audience. If you, we talk about this when we talk about like digital footprint and being a responsible digital citizen when we talk to students. Suppose I send something to my friend of me doing karaoke. And it's like really embarrassing or whatever. And I send it to my friend and I'm like, you are going to think this is hilarious. I made this video or whatever, but please do not send it to anyone. The problem is within 3 seconds, it's now gone to the entire school, right? And I have no idea that that even happened. Once I send it, I have no idea what that other kid does with it, right? And so we see a lot of this when we go into schools and we talk to students. We hear a lot of cases where that's happening, is that kids are making a certain kid sort of the butt of the joke, so to speak, and saying really very unkind things, and then it's going out to everyone because it can be shared so quickly, right? And then it's also extremely difficult to delete. Again, we talk to kids about this. What you put out there is out there. And even that, I'm not on Snapchat. You guys might know more about this than I do. But apparently it comes on for a short amount of time and then it goes away. But the reality is somebody can screenshot it. Yeah, absolutely. So you have to be really careful about what's being shared and what's being said. The other thing is, and I even see this as an adult, is that people have become very bold behind a screen. They feel like they can say whatever they want. They feel like they can, react. When I was an elementary school counselor, I had this girl who sent this email to this boy in her class. This was a sweet, sweet little thing. And when this parent came in and showed me this email, my eyes were on fire. Like, what? Like, I can't believe that this girl even knew these words, right? And so that's one piece to it. But I know, like, for me, I've had to get off some Facebook pages because people are just so unkind, right? And I think that we're seeing that from our kids, too. So bullying with social media, also spreading lies, posting photos and videos. And for a lot of our kids, if they are having this constant inundation of pictures, rumors, gossip, all that kind of stuff, it's really hard on their mental health. We're seeing lots of kids who are developing anxiety and possibly even depression because of that experience. This is specific to cyberbullying. What to do, do not engage. I always say to kids, you know what, don't engage. The other thing is, a lot of kids want to immediately delete it because it's so upsetting. I always say, don't, like, you can screenshot it and then delete it, but in order for anything to be done, you have to have the evidence. So it's really important to make sure that you have that. The other thing is, I always say to kids, you know what? Block them. If they're mistreating you, if they're doing whatever, just block them. Now, what's interesting is some kids will say to me, well, I don't want to block them. I don't want to, like, miss anything. I don't want to be I don't want to miss, you know. And I say, then you got to make a choice here, right? I mean, that's your big decision. The other thing is, you can report this stuff to social media platforms. I'm going to be completely honest. No one has ever said, Naomi, have you ever had this as a social worker? Like, no one has ever said to me, I reported this to Instagram or whatever, and they took care of it. Nobody, a kid's never said that to me. Do you know if they follow through with that? Okay. Enlisting adult help, and also I had a few situations when I was a middle school counselor where I encouraged the parents to get police involved. It was to that level of harassment and bullying that I said, I really feel like, and it became also physical, like this kid keyed the parents' car in the driveway, and I'm like, you gotta, like, go to the police with this. This is beyond what you're gonna be able to deal with. Okay, so just a few things. Kids who are most often bullied, kids who might have differences, who might maybe seem to be different than the norm, which who knows what the norm is anymore, but appearance and body size, perceived to be in the LGBTQ plus community, degree of masculinity or femininity, performance in school, race, ethnicity, national origin, and or religion. I don't have to really probably tell you that in our climate of our world today, that is a big issue. Low-income households, and then youths with disabilities and other special health needs, which is interesting to me. I feel like we've come a long way, in that many of our students are very empathetic towards kids in that last category. I think schools have done a great job of teaching empathy, abilities, awareness events, things like that. And so I don't see that as much as I used to, but certainly possible. Some possible indicators of students who might be bullies. Again, this is all might. Kids who hold power over others, meaning they have social, Vince used this term, social capital, right? They feel like they are sort of all powerful for whatever reason that might be, right? Whether it be athletically, academic performance, whatever. Kids who enjoy controlling others, who have a lack of empathy or compassion for others, feel more powerful. One of the things, I want to go back to lack of empathy, one of the things that I think we need to kind of think about when we are deciding on how to approach a situation with our own kid, we have a lot of students today who might have different abilities, that because of that, it causes them to seem less empathetic or compassionate towards others, when in reality it is a symptom of possibly their different ability levels. And so I think that sometimes we need to really think about that. It is usually very obvious. People know a few months into the classroom who those kids are, right? So sometimes I've worked with situations where I'm going to just give an example in my own personal counseling time. A student who might be on the spectrum just does not know how to effectively relate to other kids, and they're not trying to be mean, and they're not trying to be hurtful. They just want social connection, and they don't know how to do it, right? And so if your kid is having a situation that you feel like you need to address with the teacher, just kind of keep that in mind, because I just encourage you to approach that situation a little bit more delicately than possibly another situation. Okay. So some other indicators, students who have lack of emotion or remorse when discussing negative behaviors, enjoy conflicts, and refuse to accept responsibility for negative behaviors. One of the big things, and I'm going to talk in a little bit about working with the person who's the perceived bully, is that it's important to understand the reasons behind the behavior. One of my former colleagues used to say this all the time, and I have come to believe that a lot of times it's true, that behavior is the language of emotions. That I want to believe that people are not innately mean, but that there is something behind the behavior that is making them want to act in that way. And I think that it's really important to get behind what those reasons might be and help with that. Some myths about students who bully. Students who bully are loners. They have low self-esteem and are insecure. Sometimes that's the complete opposite of some of the kids that we see that bully. Students bully others because they want attention. Could be true or not, maybe. Bullying behavior is a normal part of children being children. Please do not believe that's true, because I don't believe that that's true. But I think sometimes, it's that whole boys will be boys mentality. So certainly if your child is involved in a situation, you definitely should help them to speak up about it. And then only boys bully others. I'm going to just say this because I have a daughter who has at times not been very kind to others. And there's a lot of girls who are really good at bullying other girls. So that's kind of a myth that and they are, oof, man, they fight with those mouths, don't they? And I'm just going to share a personal thing. I just thought about this. When we talk about a reason behind the behavior, my daughter she's 26 now, God love her, she is doing so great, but she had a time in her life, kind of like upper elementary, middle school, where she was not very kind to other girls. And it turned out, and I'm not saying that this is acceptable in any way, but in talking to her teachers and counselor, our pediatrician, who is a developmental pediatrician, it turned out that she had social anxiety and was eventually diagnosed with that. And that was sort of her way to cope with her feelings of inadequacy. It was that mentality of, you're not going to want to be my friend anyway, so I'm going to give you a reason not to be my friend, to not like me, kind of a thing, right? So I sort of lived that sort of piece to it. Okay, so why children do not ask for help, feelings of helplessness, their fear of backlash. Any of my friends who work in the school know that kids always say to you, if I say something, it's going to be worse, right? Wanting to hide humiliating experiences or rumors from adults. A lot of times when kids are being bullied, they're embarrassed by what's happening, and so they don't really want to speak up. Sometimes they've done something that they know is wrong. I'm going to give you a great example, sending nudes. You can see I've worked with this a lot. And so then those pictures are being passed around and bullying ensues, but they're embarrassed to tell you what they originally did. because they know it's the wrong thing to have done. So feelings of social isolation and then a fear of rejection from peers. They don't want to be known as that kid because they're afraid that the kids around them are going to be like, well, I'm not going to hang out with you because I know you're going to tell on me, or you're going to do this, or you're going to do that, or that kind of stuff. Okay. Okay, so here's the thing. Signs to look for. I think a lot of our kids are afraid to tell parents what's going on for a lot of reasons. One is they're embarrassed, but another thing is, I hate to say this, I think sometimes kids are afraid of what the parents are going to do. Like, Mom, please don't go to the school, right? And so they don't speak up about it. But some of the things to look for where you might suspect there's a situation going on, a reluctance to go to school, unexplained physical injury, changes in behavior, a decline in academic performance, missing personal belongings, and more emotional than usual. The interesting thing about this is also what, when I talk to both kids and adults about signs of depression, these are also very similar signs that we talk about, right? A really big thing that I always recommend is looking for changes in behavior. That are unexplainable. Suppose like your kid becomes sort of withdrawn and isolates themselves, but you know, like something happened, and it's explainable, then that's maybe not something to worry about so much. But if all of a sudden your kid starts acting really different, they don't want to talk about it, things like that, then it's kind of time to start probing a little bit. I always recommend starting the conversation, but then letting them guide the way. I don't know about your kids, but my kids, if they were not ready to talk about something, it was like the Brinks truck of emotions. Like, they would not let on. But when they felt like they were ready to share and to talk, then it's like all spilling out at 11:30 at night, right? So kind of, just kind of gently approaching, how are things going? Anything new at school? Anything, whatever, that kind of thing. And just kind of give them an indication that it's safe to talk about it. If you notice one of these signs, please, 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 do not directly say to your kid, "Are you being bullied?" like that. Because here's the thing. I don't want you putting words into their mouth. I mean, if they're not, but if they are, sometimes this is even though my kids are grown, sometimes my daughter she'll say something and she'll be like, "Oh my gosh, so Mom, like 3 weeks ago this happened, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And she'll say, "Because I knew you were going to react exactly like you're reacting," right? Kids know what is going to get the reaction from you, right? And if a child is truly being bullied, believe me, I'm a mama bear when I need to be, and those claws come out. But this is really not the time to do that. It's the time to gather facts, listen, actively listen, ask questions. I know that our first reaction is to just get in there, right? But it's like that thing that they tell you when you have toddlers. If they fall down and scrape their knee, don't like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" Because then they start crying because they think it's a big deal, right? This is kind of the same situation. They don't need you to be having like this huge reaction to the situation. They need you to be calm and listen to them and then make a plan for what to do, okay? All right. So I want to talk a little bit about this, and I want to say, I think in bullying situations, we always talk about the victim and the bully, but Naomi, we were all having a conversation about kind of what to talk about and all that kind of stuff, and what Naomi said to me that I think is really interesting is the whole concept of mutual harm, is that a lot of, like, in a situation, it seems like it's the victim. Everything is happening to this kid, but sometimes in the situation, both parties are being harmed in some way, okay? And I want you to, you're gonna drive away going, that Mindy, no, I'm not listening to her, because what I'm gonna say to you is, if your child is being bullied, it will rip your heart out. I know that. But remember, that kid who is bullying is also somebody's kid. And they might be struggling too, in a different way than your kid is. Okay. So some of the ways that we recommend working with the victim is helping them to build connectedness and foster friendships. I think it's really important that kids who are the victim of bullying, who are being made fun of or whatever, we teach them how to develop good, positive friendships and relationships with people, and also build a sense of connectedness to their school and the trusted adults within their building. Also, teaching your kid to be assertive but not aggressive, right? It's really important that you help to empower your child to deal with this situation. I know our first reaction, especially with our littles, is to immediately call the school, right? But it's really important that we give kids the skills to be able to navigate some of these situations on their own, and then you step in when it's like not going anywhere, right? I'm gonna get on my one little soapbox for a minute and talk about the fact that a lot of times in today's world, we as parents are not allowing our kids to learn problem solving. We are doing everything for them. And again, I'm not saying parents are bad or they're doing a bad job of parenting, because they're doing what they think is the correct thing to do. We don't want our kids to fail. We don't want our kids to be uncomfortable in any way. We don't want our kids to be disappointed. So in an attempt to make sure that doesn't happen, we've also now not helped them to develop problem-solving skills and resiliency. And so when they're in a situation, perhaps bullying, perhaps failing a test, perhaps not getting the lead in the school play, whatever it is, we are the ones who are now calling the drama teacher or calling the superintendent to get the drama teacher fired, right? So this is a great time to say to your kid, listen to what they have to say. Listen to what the situation is. What are the events that are happening? All that kind of stuff. And then say, let's talk about a plan. What can we do here? I feel like tomorrow you need to go in and ask your teacher if you can have a conversation, or the counselor, or the whoever. And then let the school do what they do best, right? I'm always going to defend school personnel. I'm just going to say that, having worked in schools. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. Also, encouraging open communication, helping them to build resiliency and self-esteem, like reminding them that they have the skills, they have a lot of strengths, and they can handle this situation as well as other things that come up. Also, sometimes kids call things bullying that's not really bullying, and so that's part of the problem to begin with. So saying, well, let's talk about this. This happened one time. What have you been taught in school about what bullying is, right? What's the definition of that? The other thing is saying to kids, this isn't your fault. Like, you didn't bring this on. I think sometimes kids were like, well, I didn't speak up. I didn't whatever. It's not their fault at all. Okay, I'm a big believer in also working with the bully, so I'm just going to talk about this. Again, a lot of times they need to be taught how to foster friendships, how to build connectedness, and also build their self-esteem as well. Teaching them empathy and perspective taking, trying to get to the root of the problem. What is really behind this behavior? Brainstorm ways to express what they're feeling more productively. Sometimes they just don't have the language. The poor Grossman children had grown up emoting because their mom, the first year I was a school counselor, my kids were 5 and 2. And so they have really been forced to talk about feelings a lot through the years. Sometimes it's almost too much. But the reality is just some kids don't know how to express their feelings productively. And so they do it through other means. The other thing is issuing consequences when it's appropriate, but also trying to change the behavior. I do believe that sometimes kids have to have consequences for behavior, things that have happened. There's a district policy, I've been told, about that kind of stuff. But I also believe in education and changing behavior. So if something happens, a student does something, whether it be bullying or something else, that we not only say, okay, I need you to know there is a consequence for this, but I also want to help you understand why that is hurtful, or how to do it differently and better the next time, right? I think we're always sort of, especially if it's your kid who's at the other end of the bullying, I think we're always so quick to go in. We need them to be punished. We need them to be punished. All the educational research says that kids don't necessarily learn anything or change anything if all they're doing is always being punished and there's no education or behavior change happening underneath all of that. Okay. I want to talk about the parent-school partnership because I think this is a lot of the reason why we're talking about this, right? So first of all, clarifying what bullying is, ask parents to encourage their student to speak to adults at school to develop a plan. One of the hardest things I will ever say to you is avoid getting emotional and angry. That's always easier said than done. But listening calmly without judgment. Please, 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 if your child says, Johnny is bullying me, blah, 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 please do not say anything negative about Johnny in front of your kid, because that's like the worst thing that you can do. That's not modeling good behavior, right? But that does happen. So don't blame, but instead try to find solutions to the problem. I think that sometimes the parents of the kid who did bullying feels as bad and might be as embarrassed as the parent of the kid who's a victim, right? And so just trying to stay away from the blame game, trying to work together to find solutions to make sure it doesn't happen again. I talked about, is there something going on behind the behavior, empowering kids, understand that there might be mutual harm, and please trust school personnel to handle the situation. I think sometimes we don't give the people at schools who are in charge of these types of things enough credit for doing the right thing. I promise you, everybody, I always say this, people who work in schools are not there to get rich. It's a hard job. It's really hard. And you're not getting paid a lot of money. So what's bringing them back to that building every single day is that they care about kids, and they love kids, and they want the best for kids. And so trust them to work with you. I always say, always call it the triad of success: kids, parents, teachers. Work together to figure out a plan to move forward in a positive way, right? And I always say, I go into schools now, and kids will be like hanging from the chandeliers, and the teachers will say to me, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry the kids were like so out of control today." And I'm like, "I've seen everything." Like, nothing surprises me anymore, nothing. And your veteran school personnel, they've seen everything too, and they have a lot of great ideas on how to handle situations. They have a lot of experience doing it, and they want to work with you, not against you. So let them do that. Okay. All right. So some things to think about. Bullying is long-term and repeated. Support, practice, and time are needed to master new skills. So sometimes I think, like, when a plan happens, we expect it to the behavior or whatever to change immediately, and sometimes it takes a little time. Like, everybody's gung ho when when the plan's first put into place, but as time goes on, maybe people get a little bit lazy and kind of forget the plan, and so we need to revisit it, right? So don't, we don't want to sort of open up old wounds, but we want to remember, like, hey, let's all sit down and talk about this, because I feel like things are kind of going backwards a little bit. But when kids are changing their behavior, it does take a little bit of practice. It does take a little time, just like it does with adults. Also, bullying is a relationship problem, and it's peer abuse, not peer conflict. So oftentimes, that is how the school handles it, not necessarily as a conflict, but instead as an abuse of so-called power. Okay. This is just, when I talk to groups, sometimes I talk to school staff, these are things that I suggest for schools to do to build a community of support for kids and adults. So if you see something you think would be a great idea, and maybe it's not happening in your building, your kid's building, because I know we have parents from all different buildings here, it might be something to talk to bring up and kind of have a conversation about. A big thing is creating a culture of acceptance, empathy, and kindness. I go into a lot of buildings where I see lots of different programs happening, because I worked in schools for a long time, I'm always so interested, especially if I've never been to a school before. Like, tell me about your character ed here, tell me about your whatever. And a lot of schools are developing cultures of acceptance through a lot of different programs that they do. I have been into the elementary school a bunch of times doing presentations for the students. That school to me is like visually inviting. It's like always, I was there, it was like an Alice in Wonderland theme or something. And just the kids were like excited to be in the building. And it was just like a very inviting space. And just the way the teachers spoke to the kids in the classrooms that I was in was just very kind and caring. So talking about that, encouraging kids to speak up using appropriate language, whether it be about bullying or anything else, really empowering kids to speak up about different things. Creating a climate of support for bullies, victims, and upstanders. Also, school personnel should set a good example. I worked in 3 different buildings in my education career. Not everyone is nice to each other. Not all the adults are nice to each other. And sometimes I would be walking down the hall and there's like this little coffee clutch of teachers, and I, as an adult, heard them gossiping about another teacher. Kids hear that stuff, right? And so really, like, making sure that the school personnel sets a good example for how we treat each other. Helping kids to feel connected, being vigilant, and intervening early. If you see something, address it, right? Walking in the halls. The places where I say we need to be the most vigilant: bathrooms, playground, bus. I know, like, adults don't really ride the bus. little corners that small kids can get into that adults might not be able to see. All those are areas that we need to be a little bit more vigilant about watching what's happening. These kids are good. Some of these kids, they're just really, really good at what they do. And then also developing policies and practices to follow. I think the worst is when you, especially I've even heard kids say like, well, why did I get in trouble and he did the same thing as me? And, and I think sometimes that leads to a lot of bad feelings and things like that. So really just letting everybody know what the policies and protocols are. I talk about this too. I was just doing a conference yesterday and we were talking about revealing information if a kid comes back from a hospitalization, which is totally different than this topic. But why I bring it up is that I think a lot of times parents want to know stuff that legally we can't share. And so just respecting that and knowing that they are doing what's right for your kid and they're also doing what's right for the other kid. And that might not be the same thing, but it's fair for whoever needs that at the time. Okay. All right, so I don't even know what time it is. Mr. Estrada gave me this information, and I'll let you, do you want to talk about this?
Well, Naomi, who's sitting there, and myself and Kayleen Portel, our ECC MRH Elementary School social worker, met with Mindy last week. And thank you for spending time with us to kind of look at the presentation. We wanted to add information about what's happening at MRH on a foundational level. Again, this is just the beginning of the conversation to get common language and common understanding of how we approach this topic. So, we use MTSS, multi-tier systems of support. Tier 1's like the foundational piece. And here's some Tier 1 things that we do. Community education like tonight, providing information to our parents and our community members. We do staff training on bullying every single year. And in fact, we just talked about it today at a meeting Dr. Jamison and I are on with some staff about how we do the videos. And we have not opted to test out of it yet. We watched the whole video about bullying every year. This is my 31st year in public education. I still watch that video and learn something every year. It's because it's an ongoing refresher that you need, so you're paying attention to it. So we do training for district-wide. Everybody gets it. We have kind of committed some funds and resources to having social, emotional interventionists in all of our buildings that can help navigate, repair, and restore. What's different about this, many years ago there was a zero-tolerance approach to all kinds of discipline. It was very punitive and concrete because there was a real fear in the country about that we were too loose. So there was a zero tolerance. And the problem with that, and I was working here then at MRH specifically, the problem is I wouldn't even say doing a good job. We were getting kids out of the building. They were flying out of here suspended. But there was no reentry plan. There was no way, no method for them to kind of reintegrate with their peers. They were just out for 5, 10 arbitrarily days. And we knew that wasn't working for them. The behaviors continued, and kids continued to be victimized, and there was a lot of harm in the community. So we've invested in social emotional interventions that can help kids navigate the spaces in real time and re-enter the spaces when they have consequences. We have invested in restorative practices, again, K-12. There's more room for growth to bring into the classrooms. But again, and this is, I think, a bit of a myth that I would probably add to the slide. There's a myth that we only do restorative practices, that there's no consequences. And there are consequences sometimes, especially if there's real harm. But we do both. It's a both and. Because there's sometimes natural consequences that have to take place when there's real harm done, but we want to also reintegrate and repair so that those kids have a chance to be together. In this small community, they're together for 13 years sometimes. There's only about 100 kids per cohort, so we want to really repair. Because not only repairs their relationship, but it helps heal the community. So we've invested some resources there. There is some classroom instruction, again, Tier 1 on anti-bullying. Ms. Elam really invested. She kind of pointed it out to us. We use Second Step as our SEL curriculum for our elementary and ECC and middle school, and they added, cost of money, was worth it, on anti-bullying. There is a board policy that really directs, and this is relatively new in the state of Missouri, that helps us define what bullying is, reporting mechanisms, our obligation, our covenant to you, the community, about dealing with bullying. It's available publicly for you, JFCF. and it kind of gives them some guidelines on how to work. So this kind of gives you some foundational pieces. The one thing I did not include in the slide is there's also an opportunity to report bullying from our website. If you go to the website, mrhschools.net, there's a parent tab, and there's a link to anti-bullying resources where you can report bullying to us. So I want to kind of share that with you guys as well. So it's kind of a foundational piece. Here you go, Mindy.
All right, and I think that's, let me see. I think, oh, sorry, these are my resources. If you should need, these are not bullying resources. They are like helpline resources. But then we're to this part. Do you want to, so this is it a survey? Oh.
So it was this huge crowd, the throngs that are here at MRH. This is climate and culture season for us. We are asking for feedback from our families and our staff and our students about climate and culture. It's a QR code for the family survey. It only takes 5 to 7 minutes to complete. I think we also had handouts for you guys, so if you guys could take a few minutes and complete that. We're only doing the survey once this year. We did it in fall and spring in the last 2 years, and that was probably too much. So we're going to do only a fall survey, but we want the numbers to be up. We have about 1,100 families in the district, more or less. We'd love to get a real significant percentage. So there's a QR code there. We also have paper copies if you wanted to scan it and do it before you leave. That will be much appreciated. Yeah, so really, we have a few minutes for some questions, and really questions that are kind of focused on either presentation, clarifying things, or anything at the district level we can answer in terms of some of our foundational strategies. And if you have individual questions or things you want us to bring back to the buildings, you can write them on those cards, and we'll take those from you before we leave today. So we want you to be heard, but this might not be the forum for those kind of questions. So, but any questions about the presentation or anything on the district level?
Sorry. Abuse is like when somebody is abusing someone. Conflict is like when two people, so it's sort of that whole idea of the power over someone else. Like they're abusing someone in whatever way. I mean, I think sometimes we think of abuse as a much more, serious kind of thing. A conflict is something where two kids are like in a fight, like arguing or in a fight about something. Yeah. And, oh, go ahead. Yeah. And so sometimes people talked about dealing with bullying situations by doing like conflict mediation kind of a thing. But this is not really a conflict to be resolved in that same way. Yeah. Oh, they said you have to be on the microphone. Something. Oh,
Voice recordings are another form of bullying that we forget about because it's so easy through just adding that to a text message, adding it to Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. So voice recordings, because it's consistent and constant. So I just want to add that to the list along with the many others. But that's another huge one that I've seen that I've had to deal with in schools with kids.
Actually, a friend of mine was like, my daughter sends me voice recordings, and I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. But I'm going to add that. Thank you.
So Minnie's going to add it to our cyberbullying slide. And that was Celeste Greer, our new social worker for the city of Maplewood, the city of Richmond Heights. Welcome, Celeste. It's great to have you on board. All right. Any other questions about the presentation or about the district policies and procedures? All right. Hearing none, I just want to thank you all for coming. Thank you, Mindy, for spending this part of your evening tonight. It was great having you. Thank you, Dr. Jamison and the PTO, and for everyone who encouraged us to have this meeting tonight, Community Conversations. We'll have them every other month. I think our next one's scheduled for January? January. Okay. Topic to be determined. Again, this is we live stream this. We're going to have it available for people to view later on, and it'll be part of our archives. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.